Hi, welcome back to the Craft Channel. My name's Karen Brad, and today's episode of the Big Sew Quilt-Along, I'm going to show you how to make this Clematis block. It's made up of 25 patches, as it were, so this might take a little bit longer, but it's actually quite an easy block, with the exception of these petal pieces here. But as usual, I've done my best to make the process fairly easy to follow. So even if you've never made a block before, you can get along with it quite easily. There'll be full instructions in the description below, along with the link to our template pack and our colouring in sheets. And I'll also put all the sizes in there, but essentially you need to make this from 7 and 8 centimetre blocks of fabric. So I'll get started first of all with showing you how you make this leaf. So I've got some 8 centimetre squares. I need to put my glasses on to make sure I know what I'm doing. 8 centimetre of background and of leaf colour. I've drawn a diagonal line on the background, and I'm just going to sew these either side of the diagonal . And I'm using a scant 5mm seam allowance here. So you sew it like that, and you cut on the line. Just a couple of words about this rotary cutter. This one's from Prim, and actually it's quite an ergonomic one. You'll see that the blade is dead in the middle of it. I've got a rotary cutter that my daughter keeps nicking, and because she's right-handed, she keeps moving the blade to the other side and then doesn't tell me. But you can apply some pressure on it. You can even pop out the well, you can pop it out, the little hex key for changing your blade, so you can use it with a finger grip. I'm now not going to be able to pop this back in again, am I? Oh yeah, there you go. And also, when you're not using it, it has got a slide-over protective cover to make sure that you don't slice the tops of your fingers off when you chuck it in your sewing basket. So let's just sew the other colour leaf in the same way. I have a nasty habit of trying to do too many operations at once. For this block, you'll need to make 4 of these pieces, so you'll need to double up on the amount of fabric. But as you can see here, I've already made 2 of them. And then very simply, you create your block with a 7 centimetre square of darker colour and background. Not like that, like that. So I'll sew these together. Before I sew these together, what you do want to do, and I've said it so many times before and I've completely forgotten it, is you just want to check that your diagonal blocks have come down to 7 centimetres, and if they haven't, line them up on your cutting mat. Line them up on your cutting mat and just trim down that excess fabric. What I will always do with my measurements is I will tell you slightly too big, because it's much easier to get rid of a bit of fabric than it is to try and stick it back on. Can't do it with that ruler because that keeps slipping. Depending on the seam allowance that you use when you're making this block will depend on how big your block comes out. I always talk about using a 5mm seam allowance. Imagine my surprise when I actually measured it one day and I'm using probably nearer a 3.5mm seam allowance, and then wondering why things don't match up. It's sometimes easier just to spend a minute or so squaring it up so you have less problems when you come to make your quilt up. So now I'm going to sew these pieces together. So that's one half of the leaf. What I've done here is where I haven't actually pressed my seam, I have got it rucked up under the foot. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start this seam from the other end that hasn't got the layers. And one point I also want to just talk about is if you've seen any of my demonstrations before, you'll know that I tend to use just white thread, white polycotton thread. I've actually been given some Metler silk finish cotton thread. It's not life-changing, but it's so much nicer than what I've been using. The finish is better on it, and also when you do make mistakes like this, it's just so much easier to unpick. It doesn't produce so much fluff. And there's a colour chart actually behind me in the background. I don't know if you can see it. It comes in a massive range of colours. So you're guaranteed of finding a match for your fabric when you're top stitching. So that's the other part of the leaf. So I've just stitched the remaining leaf pieces. And when they're trimmed up, they want to measure 13 centimetres square. So we have each of these. And then what you need to do is create, put it over here so it's a bit more in the center. You need to create this top petal. So what you do is effectively you sew small triangles of background onto a square of colour. And I tend to leave that colour on there. If you want to make sure your quilt is only one layer, you can trim that excess off. But I find it's very handy to keep on there to make sure that you're squared up your block to the right amount. I haven't explained that very well. You'll see what I mean as I'm doing it. So this is a 7 centimetre block. I'm just going to finger press it into quarters. Like so. And this is a 4.5 centimetre block. But I'm just going to cut in half diagonally. So you want your background, your petal colour right side up. Take your centre point, put the point of your half square triangle about 3 millimetres away. Check its squareness and pop a pin in it. And then just sew it to the background with a scant 5mm seam allowance. That's better. And you can see when I folded that back, it is virtually in line with the background. Do the same on an adjacent corner. Just pop it on there about 3mm away from each finger press centre line. And finger press it. So you've got your top of your petal shape, and the reason it was important to do that so that it was lining up with that top edge better is so that you have this sort of 3mm piece here where you've got an overlap, because that will then be covered by the seam, and you'll have a proper point. If your points were right at the edge, which is what happened here, and I'm sorry I was too lazy to correct it, my point was right on the edge, and so where I've overlapped it with a seam allowance, I've truncated the point of my flower. Again, it's one of those things, if you're a perfectionist, it will drive you mad. If you just enjoy making a quilt for the sheer joy of sewing and making a quilt, you're not going to notice it once it's on your bed. So I'm just going to make the last petal in the same way. And then hopefully we can join this block together. And this one's taken a little bit longer because it is made out of 25 patches. So there's no even number. You know, if you've got a 16 patch quilt, you can sew it together in blocks of 4. 25 is a very strange number. But it does make a very nice clematis block. And we've called it the Centenary Clematis. And we've done that in recognition of Janomi's 100 years. So that's that. Let's just press them properly. Because if you're going to make this block, either make it properly or don't bother making it at all. That's what my mother always used to tell me. Not about quilting, about just generally everything. Usually tidying my bedroom. And so, what I'm going to do is sew each of these petal points to a background. So you'll end up with 4 petals, 4 sets of leaves and 1 centerpiece. So let's think of the easiest way to form this. Let's make that into a 9-patch block. So sew your centerpiece to the bottom edge of 1 petal. And then we'll join this up here. Again, just making sure that you're matching your seams. So I've got a 9-patch block there. And sew a petal to here. Oh, needles come undone, needles come undone, needles come unthreaded. Let me just show you this actually. Automatic needle threader. someone whose eyesight is middle-aged, shall we say. An automatic needle threader is something you wonder how you lived without. Normally you would take a little more time sewing your pieces together, but I'm aware that you've probably not got hours to spend watching me on YouTube. Just over half your flower. Sew this petal between these two leaves. And that's the bottom half of your flower. So then all you have is you have these 4 seams that you need to line up, and you can stitch the block, you can complete the block in one straight line of stitching. And there you go. So it took a little bit longer than I thought it would in my head. But realistically, if you want to make a block like this, I want to show you how to do it, sort of nearly all of the steps. There's nothing worse than being left thinking, well, how on earth did you do that? So ideally, because you've used a 5mm seam allowance, each of these blocks has come down to 6 centimetres. So, with a 5mm seam allowance on either end, moment of truth, yep, 32, obviously, because it should be 31. And again, 32. I really need to work on my seam allowances. But the good thing is there is enough here that I can just trim about 3mm off each side, and it will bring it back to a better size to join to another one. And the other thing to bear in mind is cotton's got a certain degree of stretch. You'd be amazed how much I cheat lining up seams by stretching fabric. So that's your clematis. I hope you liked that demonstration. So if you join us again very, very soon, we'll show you how to make another block so you can make your very own Big Sew Quilt-Along floral quilt. Till then, thank you for watching. Take care. If you've been inspired to create, please share your makes with us in the comments section below. And if you've enjoyed videos by the Crafts channel, hit the like button. Want to see more of us? Then click subscribe. See you next time.